the podium at Baruch College, named for the great Bernard Baruch, who first in 1946 proposed that weapons of mass destruction be placed under international inspection and control. I'm grateful to the audience also for giving me the chance to revisit my misspent Trotskyist days. Dishing out a leaflet in steaming heat on the street outside made me feel and look, I hope, much younger. And we're also, of course, on this side of the house here to share with Mr. Galloway the ambition that his views and his record be much better known than they are. And most of you, I hope, will have the leaflet that details this, and those of you who don't, and those of you who are watching or joining us from other audiences can go to hitchensweb.com and download the whole lot, and I hope they will, and share it. An impression, I think, ladies and gentlemen, has been allowed to form, and perhaps even to coagulate and to congeal, that it is only those of us who support the regime change, the revolutionary change in Iraq, who have any explaining to do. I think that that assumption needs to be countered from the very beginning. If you examine the record of the so-called anti-war movement in this country and imagine what would have happened had its counsel been listened to over the last 15 and more years, you would have a world in which the following would be the case. Saddam Hussein would be the owner and occupier of Kuwait. He would have succeeded in the annexation, not merely the invasion, but the abolition of an Arab Muslim state that was a member of the Arab League and of the United Nations. And with these resources, as we now know, because he lost that war, he was attempting to equip himself with the most terrifying arsenal that was possible for him to lay his hands on. That's one consequence of anti-war politics. That's what would have happened. In the meanwhile, Slobodan Milosevic would have made Bosnia part of a greater Serbia, and Kosovo would have been ethnically cleansed and also annexed. The Taliban would be still in power in Afghanistan if the anti-war movement had been listened to, and Al-Qaeda would still be their guests. And Saddam Hussein, with his crime family, would still be privately holding ownership over a terrorized people in a state that's been most aptly described as a concentration camp above ground and a mass grave underneath it. Now, if I had that record politically, I would be extremely modest. I wouldn't be demanding explanations from those of us who said it's about time that we stop this continual capitulation to dictatorship, to racism, to aggression and to totalitarian ideology, that we will not allow to be repeated in Iraq, the failures in Rwanda and in Bosnia and in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And we take pride in having taken that position, and we take pride in our Iraqi and Kurdish friends who are conducting this struggle, on our behalves, I should say. What did it mean to accept this responsibility? We knew it was a weighty one, and we knew it was a dangerous one. I will argue that the war was both just and necessary. I think one could separate perhaps the two concepts. Iraq had lost its sovereignty as far as a state can do under international law. There are 4 conditions under which a state may be deemed or said to have sacrificed its sovereignty. These are, if it participates in regular aggressions against neighboring states or occupations of their territory, if it violates all the letter and spirit of the terms of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and in other words, fools around promiscuously with the illegal acquisition of weapons of mass destruction. Third, if it should violate the Genocide Convention, the signatories to which are obliged, without further notice, to act either to prevent or to punish genocide. And fourth, if it plays host to international gangsters, nihilists, terrorists and jihadists. Iraq met all these 4 conditions repeatedly and demonstrated its willingness to repeat them on many occasions. Its sovereignty was at an end. It was under international sanctions. It was a ward of the international community. Its people were being starved in order to build palaces for their psychopathic dictator. And it was furthermore imploding as a state and as a society. The divide and rule policy of the Ba'ath Party had led to appalling ethnic and confessional hatreds within the country. An imploded state would have made these worse, and you know who would have invaded then. Turkey would have invaded to try and take Kurdistan. Iran would have invaded to support its extremist Khomeiniite proxies, and Saudi Arabia would have intervened in order to do the same favor for the Sunni and Wahhabist and Salafist extremists. As a matter of fact, all these 3 foreign interventions are taking place at present All those three powers are trying to meddle in Iraq, but we're fortunate, as are the Iraqi people, that there is a coalition to hold the ring and to prevent it from becoming another Rwanda or another Congo, another vortex of violence and cruelty and destabilization and war. And this, I think, again, is a point to take pride in. It was the only responsible course. I'm willing at any point to take questions, and I'm sure I shall be invited to, about my own criticisms of and misgivings about differences with those who conducted and conduct this policy. But on these main points, it seems to me that there's very little room for debate. What are the... oh, thank you. Now, we know, and we make no secret of the extraordinary difficulties that have attended this I think, very noble and risky and worthwhile enterprise. All of you will know, all of you will have seen some of the abysmal consequences of this. But you have, I think, the responsibility of imagining what the alternative would be. I am simply going to say what I think the positive reasons are. Excuse me, the positive consequences are. And I hope someone will be showing me the time, maybe, just so I don't trespass on my own argument or the patience of the comrades. Who's going to be showing me the time? Yeah, okay. Will you let me know when I've got 3 minutes, say? Positive results, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. A man who planned and ordered and supervised and took delight in the genocide and torture and aggression and the occupation of 2 neighboring states and the massacres of their people is in jail now and will follow Slobodan Milosevic and Augusto Pinochet into the dock quite soon. I know there are some people here who don't take delight in this, but I will say that I do. That it's a long overdue justice. A long overdue act of justice and mercy. A constitution, a federal democratic constitution, is being debated now as we speak with the printing of 5 million copies of a provisional document, debated on 6 television channels, 6, and perhaps as many as 100 newspapers. In a country where 3 years ago it was death, not just for you but for your family, to possess a satellite dish, or to attempt to distribute a leaflet. Death for you and your family, and not a quick one either. Does anyone not agree that this is a night and day difference? I invite them to say if they don't. The largest stateless minority in the Middle East, the people of Kurdistan in other words, who have suffered many years of oppression and exile and occupation in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, and in Lebanon and in Turkey, have begun to scramble, so to say, to their feet to assume something like their full height as a people. Even before the intervention, they were producing an autonomy, a democracy, a self-determination of their own in the provinces of northern Iraq, which when I saw them last were a landscape of desolation and depravity. You could still smell the poison gas, you could still smell the mass graves, the ruined cities, the burned hillsides, the women who had chemical burns that still burn after years. Out of this, the Kurds have begun to build and help other Iraqis build when they could have been chauvinistic. They could have been xenophobic. They could have said enough with Iraq. We're through with it, we're leaving. Instead, accepted their internationalist responsibilities. President Talabani, it seems to me, is a president of whom any country in the region could be proud, and not just by the sort of comparisons one could make. This is an extraordinary, unarguable, unambiguous game. The disarmament of Libya, the capitulation of Colonel Gaddafi, his abandonment of his covert arsenal of weapons of mass destruction, and the walking back of the evidence that he gave us, because we all have it now, thank you, sir, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which I think is the right place for it, on analysis was able to disclose to us that the provenance of much of this illegal weaponry was the AQ Khan network in Pakistan, a kind of Walmart for WMD, nukes are us, with a line stretching all the way from North Korea to the Iraqi envoys who in March 2003, as the coalition was preparing to intervene, were negotiating in Damascus with the envoys of Kim Jong-il to buy North Korean missiles off the shelf. And people say, Iraq and WMD can't be mentioned in the same breath. Now, not everything about this can be attributed to the intervention, but it's noticeable, I think, that Colonel Gaddafi did not, when he wanted to capitulate, go to Mr. Kofi Annan, for example, or that great statesman, Mr. Jacques Chirac, a man so corrupt, as said of Mr. D'Alembert, I think, in Sentimental Education, so corrupt he would willingly have paid for the pleasure of selling himself. Nor to Gerhard Schroeder, the rump figure of what was once a proud German social democracy. No, he came to Mr. Blair and to Mr. Bush and says, I'm out of this game now, and you can analyse everything I've got. That's not nothing, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a step towards disarmament and non-proliferation into the bargain. And then the spread, no less important, of the democratic impulse within the region. Not only is this being spread by the vector of the Kurdish people and their revolution, because as you will be readily able to find if you haven't read of it already, there have been demonstrations in Qamishli, the Kurdish main city in northern Syria, among the oppressed Kurds who suffer under the ossified theocracy of Iran, and of course in Turkey as well, to pick up the message that yes, liberation is at hand. These demonstrations broke out on the day that President Talabani was sworn in as president of Iran. There's an unmistakable connection between them. We who have been friends of the Kurds are very proud of their achievement, and we intend to stand by them no matter what. I will add that the moral leader of the Egyptian democracy movement, the man who has begun to break open the argument in Egypt, and who suffered a long period of imprisonment during this time and was written to by Nelson Mandela as Egypt's equivalent, has told me, and for quotation, that in his opinion, this new mood in the region would be unthinkable if it was not for the removal of the single worst tyrant who is present there. That's not nothing, as in point of testimony. That's from deep within the bowels of the Egyptian prison system, the man who is the moral hero of the democracy movement. He says, and I agree with him, and he's echoed by Anwar Ibrahim as far away as Malaysia, who was the Malay equivalent, and by the leader of the Socialist Party of Lebanon, Mr. Jumblat, have all stated publicly that this for them is the beginning of the end, the fall of the wall, as they put it. This, I think, is also something to take pride in. Now, I could have said this in front of any audience and against any antagonist, but in my last 2 minutes, I will have to say that I believe it is a disgrace that a member of the British House of Commons should go before the United States Senate subcommittee and not testify, but decline to testify, and to insult all those who try to ask him questions with the most vile and cheap gutter-snipe abuse. I think that's a disgrace. And it is worse than a disgrace. That's not coming out of my time. If you knew how you looked and sounded, comrades, when you do that, well, the cameras can take care of it. That's not coming out of my time. It is not just a disgrace, it is a crime that Mr. Gaddafi has profited from the theft of money from the Iraqi Oil for Food program, has told continuous lies about his profiteering from it and the foul associates that he made, at a time when Iraqi children were dying, and 11 billion from this program, 11 billion, went to the murderer and criminal and sadist and fanatic Saddam Hussein. How can anyone who's a business partner of this regime show their face in a city like this and not content with it? Not content with it. Not content with it. He turns up in Damascus. The man's search for a tyrannical fatherland never ends. The Soviet Union's let him down. Albania's gone. The Red Army's out of Afghanistan and Czechoslovakia. The hope persists. Saddam has been overthrown, and his criminal connections with him have been exposed. But on to the next. On the 30th of July, in Damascus in Syria, appearing, I've given it all to you in a piece of paper, in front of Mr. Assad, whose death squads are cutting down the leaders of democracy in Lebanon, as this is going on, to tell the Syrian people they're fortunate to have such a leader. The slobbering Dauphin, who they got because he's the son of the slobbering tyrant that came before him. How anyone with a tincture of socialist principle can act or speak in this way is beyond me, and I hope, ladies and gentlemen, far beyond you and far beneath your contempt. Thank you.